Madam Clerk, if you would, we're going to call the meeting to order. This is November the 2nd, and it's the Public Safety Committee meeting. And Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Howard.
Present.
Alderwoman, Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Boyd.
Present.
Alderman Bosley.
Present.
Alderman,
Aye.
Alderman Odenberg.
Oh, he's excused.
Alderman Narayan.
Here.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Here.
Alderman Page.
Present.
Chair Vaccaro.
Present.
How many present?
9.
Okay.
9, we have a quorum.
I'm present. We have a quorum. Okay, so we'll take approval of the minutes from our October the 26th meeting. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes of October 6, 2022.
So move.
Okay, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
We need a second.
Oh, gee, I think, oh,
Second.
sorry,
Sorry, wrong choice of words.
okay, I guess I knew what you meant, but didn't. But Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Davis.
Aye.
Alderwoman Howard.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus.
Aye.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Boyd.
Aye.
Alderman Bosley.
Aye.
Alderman Odenberg. I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderwoman Clark Hubbard.
Aye.
Alderman Page.
Aye.
Chair Vaccaro.
Aye.
9.
9 I votes. We've
9
approved.
I votes.
So we're gonna do things. I was gonna start with cure violence, but I actually want to start on something else, and then we'll get to cure violence pretty quick. Yeah, I've been thinking that I didn't know how to word this for the committee, but what I'm gonna do is more of an open mic kind of thing, if we could. I talked to Lou Galley because I originally wanted to prepare a board bill that would hold a police officer not accountable if he felt the need to take a gun away, like you saw in that school shooting. But there's a thing out there might think, so well, the police officer would be held personally liable for the $50,000 that could be fined. And so Lou Galley looked up, and I'm going to have him come on. I did send a copy. He had sent a copy to everyone on the committee. Basically, the police officer would not be held accountable. That if they feel the need to take a gun away, they would not be held accountable. It's the municipality that hires the department. So in this case, the city of St. Louis would be responsible for that $50,000 fine. That is my understanding. I asked Lou Galley to join us. So Lou, if you could turn your camera on and join us. What I'd like to do is have him give us his take on it, and then open it up for questions and to see whether or not we feel we should, do an ordinance or a board bill. And I have trouble pronouncing the word, but holding them not accountable if they feel the need, and indemnification. I just have trouble with that word. So Lou, if you can kind of explain what you've researched, and then I'd like to know from the committee if you think we should move forward with either a board bill or something to make some sort of better statement that we stand behind the police in cases like this, and that they are not personally held accountable. This is what the city, but Lou, if you can go ahead, I'm gonna mute myself and then we'll just see if anybody else has questions.
Certainly, what the alderman is talking about is violations of the Sapa Act or Second Amendment Protection Act. Under the act, police officers who are found to be in violation of the act, that they have taken somebody's firearm in contravention to that or the Missouri Constitution or the federal Constitution, that they then would, the municipality, I'm sorry, or the police department that employs them would then be liable potentially up to $50,000. That would require the person whose firearm has been taken away, whose rights have been, quote, deprived, to bring suit against the city. And if it is determined that there has been a violation of Sapa, then the penalty is $50,000. So it's not the liability is the city's or the agency, the law enforcement agency who employs the officer. The liability is not individual. I'm happy to answer any questions, so. Am I on mute here?
I was, I had muted myself and I probably with that. So I would hope that we can some thoughts on whether we move forward with putting something together. I certainly would welcome, someone from the police leadership or police organization to come in, and what I want is the police to feel comfortable if there's a situation that they feel that, they need to take a gun away from someone, that they're doing the right thing. I want them to understand fully that they are not the ones that are going to be paying this fine. If it comes up, it would be the city of St. Louis. And to me, I would trust that if a police officer's taking someone's gun, they probably feel like there's a very good reason they're taking it. So what I'm going to do, well, actually, I'm going to ask Madam Vice Chair. I think we can do it by hands up, or you want to go down the list? You're muted. I do see a couple hands up. That's all I'm seeing.
Why don't we just go, we'll do the hands up, okay?
Okay, so Alderman Davis, you were the first one with your hand up.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that we look into when it comes to legality. Because I know there's something involved with a police officer's swearing in as far as doing their job. I think that they can lose their job. I think that's a part of this. It's not just about the fine. So I don't know if Attorney Golly has looked that far into this.
Right.
Also, for me, the practicality of the city taking the liability for a $50,000 fine every time a gun is taken away from someone, based on the city of St. Louis and the desire and the nuance of everybody walking around with a gun, that could easily, very easily become more than you may bargain for. And so for me, I would rather work on getting the law removed on the state level. So I'm going to listen to everybody else, but I'm really concerned about the individual police officer, because I believe it's more than just about that fine. It has something to do with their ability to be a police officer. I think that they can remove them. Thank you.
But the fine comes to the city. That's the way it is now anyway. I mean,
I'm not worried about the fine that much.
Mhm.
I'm worried about the person losing their ability to be a police officer.
There's nothing in Sapa that would penalize an officer by terminating their employment or making them unable to become a police officer. are provisions in Sapa that relate to federal officers, and that's in 1.470. It says any political subdivision or law enforcement agency that knowingly employs an individual acting or previously acted as an official agent, employee, or deputy of the United States, or otherwise acted under color of law and enforced or attempted to enforce any of the infringements detailed in 1.420. So basically it's saying that police departments in Missouri cannot effectively hire any federal agents who have enforced federal firearms laws. So it prevents municipalities and departments from hiring potential officers, all right? But it does not call for the termination of officers for violation of Sapa.
Hopefully that helped.
Yeah, it's not about Sapa, and I unfortunately I hadn't had time to look it up, but it's more about the position itself of policing when they're sworn in, and I believe it's a state law, and as well. And so I want to, I'll look it up, and I'll allow my time to be waived. Thank you.
All right. I believe you're talking about the commissioning requirements of being a commissioned police officer, and I will go back and look at that for you, but I don't believe that there's anything in there that deals with termination of employment for violations of Sapa.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and that's what I'm worried about.
All right. I can look into that.
Thank you.
And so far, it would be, next would be Alderman Page, then Howard, then Narayan, if I got the hands up thing right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Attorney Golly, I'm curious to know if cause enters into this. And I won't go into all of the details. They're readily available in multiple media outlets. But what I'm referring to is the incident that happened, the tragic incident that happened at the Performing Arts High School in South City. There's a history that goes behind that gentleman who bought that gun, had it taken away, not by the police, by friends and relatives. He got it back. If a police officer had actually taken that gun, does just cause enter into this, or does that have to be sorted out in a lawsuit related to Sapa after the fact?
Sapa only relates to relieving somebody of their firearm who is not in violation of the law. So if somebody's in the process of committing a crime or about to commit a crime and the police take their firearm away from them, that is not a violation of Sapa. It deals with what is called legal possession of a firearm. So if you're in the process of committing a crime or you're illegally in possession of firearm, that would not be a violation of Sapa if the police took your firearm.
Right. Well, of course, if the police had confiscated that weapon when they were called, then the event may not have happened. So this could have ended up a Sapa case potentially. But I was just curious, does cause enter into this or not?
Well, cause definitely it enters into it with, you know, if the reason that they are taking that person's firearm is based upon some criminal action or on the basis that they are not allowed to possess a firearm, then yes, that's not a violation of Sapa. You know, it's difficult for me to come up with circumstances, you know, where the police would just take somebody's firearm away who is in legal possession of it. That is what this is intended to protect. It does not deal with somebody who is in illegal possession of the firearm. So if you were pulled over and there was a firearm in your car and the police said, hey, look, we're going to take this from you until we can figure some things out, but there's no other reason for them, you're not in illegal possession, and they take the firearm, well, then that would be a violation of Sapa. If they said, look, we're going to take this with us, we're going to check into some things. If they have no other reason to do that, then that would be a violation of Sapa.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
If I can add one thing on it related to cause, but it's also state of mind. The requirement is that the officer has to knowingly be taking that firearm in violation of the provisions of the Second Amendment Protection Act.
Thank you.
Alderwoman Howard, you're up.
I guess I feel like this discussion would be much more productive if we had members of the police force here with us today and maybe some clarification from police leadership. I think we're kind of fumbling around in the dark here. And also maybe we need, not to minimize Mr. Golly, but at the same time, somebody from the leadership in the mayor's office that needs to put this out. So that if they are being asked to take weapons away and there is no rule against this and that the city is the one that's being fined, that needs to come from leadership, not only us, but, the mayor's office and so forth. I kind of think that, if we're continuing to pound this, that, we need all the players at the table. And not just go on innuendo and maybe it's this way, maybe it's that way. They need to understand what their parameters are clearly, because you're asking people to risk their livelihood, as the alderwoman from the 19th said, and their careers. So I would feel better if we had all players at the table.
If I may, I very much agree with you, Alderwoman. I think that if we could get an understanding of what circumstances that the police may be taking a firearm away from somebody that would potentially be in violation of SAPA, that would be very helpful, because like I said, it's difficult for me to imagine a situation where the police are just going to pull somebody over, everything else is in order, and then just relieve that person of their firearm. So
Right. And there's so many scenarios. We're outsiders. We're not in that business. So it's really difficult for us to perceive or to get those scenarios where it may be necessary for them to remove a weapon or not. So there needs to be clarification and the players that actually perform this, the duty of policing every day at the table. Thank you. That's all I have.
And I don't disagree with that, but this is more to do exactly what we're doing. We bring more people and do what we want, but I just think that we need to move on and figure out how to prevent future incidents like this, where we're, instead of being reactive to a situation, proactive. And you're right, maybe this is the mayor's office, we just need to figure this out. And that's why I want input from this committee. Alderman Ryan.
Thank you, Chairman Vaccaro. This law has always been a bit frustrating to me because it's kind of a double-edged sword, because while we don't have any red flag laws in the state that would allow law enforcement to move to confiscate a firearm until someone had due process, if law enforcement thought that they were about to commit a crime. We also have this law that basically would punish law enforcement for acting proactively. I think it's a very flawed law that our legislators in Jefferson City passed. There's an attorney's fees clause that only goes one way in it. So a member of the general public can sue any governmental entity, and if they're successful, they recover. However, the government, if it defends the government's position successfully, there's no way for the government entity to recover the funds spent on defending their position. Additionally, the standard when you're talking about a police officer on the street, the legal standard is that they're supposed to act like a reasonable police officer. And I think what we all can assume about any reasonable individual is that reasonable individuals sometimes make a mistake. And the fact that a mistake in this situation could cost, that a reasonable police officer making a mistake in these situations could cost our police department $50,000 is pretty outrageous to me, particularly when we're hearing that coming from the same people who are adamantly screaming about defunding police departments. This is a bill that is designed to defund police departments should the police departments act proactively in a situation where they're concerned about someone who is about to commit a violent crime with a firearm. And so I really hope, particularly in light of recent events, that our legislators in Jefferson City will take another look at this and see it for what it is. Not only have they prevented law enforcement and tied law enforcement's hands on looking to stop some of these bad acts, but they're also literally defunding our police department if our police department is acting proactively. And that's the exact thing that they kind of accuse the other side of often, is defunding the police. I can't think of any other situation or piece of legislation put forward by anyone that would say, if the police department does this, we're fining them $50,000, and that comes directly out of the police department. And this is even more problematic when you look at smaller police departments. We have a fairly large police department, but if you look at smaller municipalities, a $50,000 fine is massive for the budget lines of some of those departments. And it's put police officers in a very untenable position where they're saying, we're just not going to enforce these laws. And that is not what anyone wants, I don't believe. And so, yes.
If I may, you are exactly right. It prevents them from enforcing laws. What it specifically says is that federal firearms laws are invalid. And if you attempt to enforce them, then you will be in violation of that act. So it does specifically prevent police officers from enforcing at least the federal firearms laws. And it also gives a very broad interpretation of what the Second Amendment and the Missouri Constitution allows. So
absolutely. And, if we look at, it's federal laws that stop the general public from having fully automatic rifles, from having, various explosives, from having short barreled rifles without tax stamps, from having silencers without tax stamps, all sorts of things like that. And if we let if we don't allow our local law enforcement to enforce these laws, we're stuck with a bit of a free-for-all. And I'm genuinely hoping that folks in Jefferson City will take another look at this and think maybe we got it wrong the first time, and let's clean this up. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, and two things, just my own personal comments. One, it isn't the police department, it's the municipality. So the city would be responsible. And when you talk about $50,000 being a lot of money, if you go talk to the 3 people that are dead now, check with their families and see what they felt. The $50,000 was that, I don't want to get political, but what's a life worth? If a police officer feels that gun should be taken, and if the city of St. Louis as a group, the mayor's office or whatever, can't stand behind that police officer saying, oh my God, $50,000, no. And then later find out. And I run into this with trees even, where we'll call in a tree and say, this tree's dead, it needs to come down, it don't come down. And then it falls on somebody's house. And it's happened in my ward multiple times. Seems like we're end up being reactive. And in this case, I'm saying, gee, you know what? $50,000, if a police officer, we should, us as the aldermen, the mayor's office, we should stand behind those officers and say, if you felt reasonably to take that gun, yeah. Do I think laws should be changed? Yes. Do I think they're going to be changed? I doubt it. So I just want to know, I just want the police officers to know that we're behind them. And if they take a gun, that it isn't the department, we employ the department. If we give the police back to the state, then the state would have to pay the fine, but it's the municipality that pays the police department, and $50,000 to me is, this was a tragedy. And now we're being reactive. I'm just trying to be proactive. And maybe at the end of this, we say, we should do nothing. But I personally think we bring police in and we pursue this somewhat. Alderwoman Spencer, you're next, and Vice Chairman, I see your hands up. So it would be Alderwoman Spencer, then Vice Chairman Tyus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple clarifying questions first before I make a couple comments. If I can, Mr. Galley, if you could clarify, there are still circumstances in which a police officer can take a gun legally under our current laws. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, there are circumstances that a police officer can take somebody's firearm away from them.
Firearm legally.
Mhm.
And if there are circumstances in which an officer takes a gun and it is outside of the bounds of the current laws, are there any circumstances in which officers would be personally liable for that decision, to your knowledge?
What the statute says is that if there is a violation of the act, then the liability is the department or the municipality who is employing that officer. So there's no individual liability for that officer. All right. Now, Alderwoman Davis did point out that there may potentially be an issue under the peace officer statutes, that this may be some type of dereliction of their duty, which they might be penalized for. I've taken a quick look while we've been talking, but I am going to look into that more. But yes, there is under SAPA, there is the liability is the municipality or the department employing the officer.
Okay, and in the case of the dereliction of duty, that would be a liability in a failure to take action rather than in taking an action that was beyond our legal limit. Is that correct?
When I said dereliction of duty or, whatever other transgression that an officer might make, I was speaking to what their duties and obligations are under the peace officer
Yes.
statutes,
Okay.
and whether or not
Okay.
they're violating SAPA
I'm in my second one. What's going on?
would result in some penalty to them as a breach of their duties or obligations as a peace officer.
I'll call you back as soon as we over.
Okay, I think we might have a muting issue we need to take care of. Okay, thank you. Okay, so it is our municipality or police department that would be at risk rather than the individual officers, barring that nuance that you just described. In the case of the city of St. Louis, when it comes to legal action, is that the city has a fund for lawsuits, is that correct?
I do not know for sure, but I believe so. I am not the city's attorney, so.
Okay. No, we do have in the budget, we have a several $million fund for lawsuits, and it doesn't directly come out of our police department's budget, although I take the point that it could, in theory, be allocated as such. I guess my point really is that, our police department has an incredibly difficult job, and I think everybody here certainly can agree that the officers who showed up on Monday did an excellent job making an incredibly dangerous and scary situation a lot less awful than it was. I mean, there's no words to describe. I'm grateful to hear that our officers are not personally liable, nor should they be for actions they're taking under duty in many cases, especially in cases where guns are present. So I want to push back just a little bit because, it's not an individual officer's responsibility or duty to interpret these laws. I want to know what policies have been in place from our city to direct our police department and our officers to protect them and to best protect our communities. Because while these fines are significant, certainly $50,000 is a lot of money. I agree with you, Mr. Chair, that every action we don't take is costing us dearly. Just on Halloween, 2 nights ago, while I was trick-or-treating with my son, there was a man brandishing a gun in front of 20 children, screaming children and parents. I took 2 kids under my arms behind a car to kind of calm the situation. This is out of control. We are already in a free-for-all because of all of these guns. And frankly, I've had it. I have absolutely had it with guns on our streets and in the hands of kids and in the hands of people who should not have them. And I think it is our duty and our responsibility as a city to stretch the laws, to understand the laws, and to best arm our officers with the interpretations of the laws that our city, who bears responsibility both legally and financially for all these decisions, to provide that information to our officers so that they are as equipped as possible to do the jobs that we ask them to do as police officers in our city. So, Mr. Chair, I would really like to know what policies we have in place, what information we have presented to and armed our police department with, and how we have equipped them to do the very dangerous jobs that we are asking them to do.
Thank you. And that's what I'm interested in also. And that, because we're not creating policies for the police department, we are, in a sense, going to create policies for the city as to how we support a police officer, a sheriff, however, if, they confiscate a gun. And that's kind of what I'm looking to do. How do we move forward? What do we move forward?
Well, Mr. Chair, if I may, this body, this legislative body is subject to the state, which is subject to the federal government. We are authorized under those other governmental entities. We can only do so much at our level. So it is and I say our, and I don't mean this body, I mean the city of St. Louis. It is the responsibility of the city to interpret those other laws and to provide guidance and direction to our employees. And that most certainly includes our police department and how to interpret the laws that are passed and by other government entities that are bigger than ours.
Right. And we're not asking them to, we're not trying to go against state law or anything else. We're just basically what I'm hoping that we can come out, the mayor's office or us or both, come out with something so that the police know we will support them in the case that they feel it's important to take someone's gun. Again, like the guy waving the gun on Halloween. Had he would have shot the kids, we could have been here talking about that today, and we could have reacted. Or maybe he has parents or someone that says, I just want you to know, my son Billy Bob is, a little bit out there, and I don't think he should have a gun. I'm just saying, and if a police officer were to take that gun, I think that as a body and as a city, we need to let the police officer know if you're doing something reasonable, that we're there. And I also want them to know publicly that they, because I think there's been a great misunderstanding that talking to different guys, that they felt that they were the ones personally liable. And that's not the case. And that's also why I thought, well, I want to bring this out today, that that's not the case. But I also understand what what Alderwoman Davis has said too, that, but I think we need to let the police officers know that either we need to have a policy in place or something to say that if you have taken that gun away and you reasonably believe that it's the right thing to do, we are going to support you. Yeah, we're going to pay the fine if we're wrong, but we're not going to turn around and fire you or do anything if you feel it's the right thing. And that's kind of what's on my mind. That's not
Mr. Chair, I entirely agree with you. It is the city's responsibility to interpret those laws and to provide that information to our officers and make them help to make that understanding very, very clear. It is the responsibility of the city to do that. It should not be up to the individual officers to have to make those calls. So it should be there should be very, very clear guidance. And I want to know what guidance was provided to our officers following the passage of Sapa and where we are right now with making sure that those officers have all of the information that they need, that the city has a responsibility to not only interpret, to make a pact and an alliance and allegiance and a promise to stand behind where we are, so that is very, very clear in those very, very tenuous situations, that we do have their back under these circumstances. And I want to know what those circumstances are as the city has interpreted them and provided guidance to our officers.
We will bring in the mayor's office and police officers and other people as we move forward on this. For sure. Alderwoman Tice, Vice Chairman Tice, you're up. And I don't see any other hands, so I think you're it. Unless, wait a minute. Yep, you're it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I want to just bring a few things to light. Back in April, the Missouri Supreme Court did overturn the lower court's decision that said that the St. Louis City Police and St. Louis County Police could not challenge this law. So they did overturn it. And also the feds have also intervened with a lawsuit. I don't know if it's at the Supreme Court, but it's at either Supreme Court or federal level challenging this law. And this is a very dangerous law because what it is saying is that Missouri is going to determine if federal law is legal or not. So somehow they are more qualified than they don't want the federal people to come in here and talk to the Missouri people about what they should do. But we have decided that we're going to decide whether federal law is legal if it's something that's been going on for 50 years, because they talk about the past or the present. So I think that we'll have a good chance of not seeing this be upheld. But in the meantime, I still think this goes back to the governor and whatever group of people that are passing these laws. And if they won't come and have a conversation with us, I guess I would like to hear what our state legislators have to say about what has been going on, that they were passed these kind of things. So maybe we need to work together with our state legislators to talk to them about what was the mindset that we passed something like this. You know, how can the state of Missouri say you cannot hire somebody who worked for the federal government on something that's legal? So not that you did anything legal, but because you worked for a federal agency that had a law about guns, even though it's declared legal on the federal level, we're going to say you can't be hired. I think that they are also going to start to get lawsuits for discrimination, okay, and illegal discrimination. That's my take is I do believe that it's going to be overturned, but while we see it work through the courts on the Missouri level, then on the federal levels, I would again ask the governor, would he have a conversation with us about what are you thinking? Why are you just so insistent that people be able to have guns in the city of St. Louis and in urban areas? And then you're so protective of the farmers and their rights to protect how they farm, how they protect animals, pigs, smells, cows, but you seem to be just don't care about the lives in the city of St. Louis or in urban areas. I don't get that as a person. How are you our governor? And then I'll say again, I want our governor to come have a conversation with us. Not only should you be talking to us, but you're talking to us as each of us represent a certain portion of the city of St. Louis. And why don't you want to hear another side of this? A lot of times I hear very conservative people saying that the progressives and young people, they don't understand about compromise. They don't understand about talking about the other side of it. I wouldn't disagree with you, But I say equally, you don't understand compromise and you don't understand the other side of what's going on right now. If you start, I bet you, if somebody starts slaughtering hogs and pigs, you would find a way to look out for that. But if they slaughter, and I'm serious, this is how I look at it. You go over to a school and you slaughter people and you're just making more laws saying we want to make sure people can have assault rifles and they can have this, and the police better not make a mistake and actually take something, or we're going to find a way to put a chilling on effect on you being a police. And yet at the same time, you continue to talk about, I'm pro law enforcement. I'm pro police. I don't support defunding the police. I never did support defunding the police. This was like trying to explain, they don't mean that. What they mean is that we need to look at the budget. But if all that you can ever come up with is to make sure we have more guns in the community, I think you guys need to go back and watch the cowboy shows, because I do watch the Westerns because my uncles grew up doing that. So, and you will see that they had a lot of shoot 'em ups and killings back then when everybody had guns. So if that's your remembrance that, oh, it's so great to have all these guns, it's not. And last but least, I wish at some point somebody would read the Second Amendment, because it does not say what everybody says it says. It says we have a right to have a well-funded militia. It does not give us all of those rights that have expanded over the years. And there were several Supreme Court justices who said that openly. But because we have such a well-funded gun regulatory, the people that have, what is National Rifle Association, they have taken, the people have a right to have a well-funded militia and made it to, you can have any kind of gun you want to. You could kill children. You could go to schools. You can go to movies. You can go to shopping malls. It doesn't make any difference. At the end of the day, we still have a right to have guns. And I believe that the only way that's going to change, and I don't wish this, is that the people who are doing all that defending, if their people start to get killed, maybe they will understand the pain of having your child shot down in cold blood unnecessarily. So I'm just hoping that both on the state level with the Missouri Supreme Court, and then going up to the federal and the Constitution, the Supreme Court, that will be thrown out. I don't know much about this. I don't know where the Supreme Court will go on this issue right now. But I do know that at least our Missouri Supreme Court have supported our police and said they had a right to challenge this law. And I'm hoping that they will win. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Members of the committee.
Thank you. And so Alderwoman Spencer, you have your hand up and no one else does. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out just one additional thing here, and that's this. These laws are at the state and federal law level, but we have a responsibility, and even though we are a smaller government entity and we are only authorized through our powers, with our powers through those other government entities, we do have a responsibility. And it really is, we need to do everything we can to remove guns from our streets that don't need to be there. I have pick up bullets almost every single day on walks in my community. I think many of us see them, we hear them, and we feel them. And of course, so many of our families have lost loved ones due to gun violence, far too many. And it is time, we really do have a responsibility as a city government to do everything we can within our power to have policies in place that guide and direct our employees to the best of our ability. We cannot just shake our heads and say, we've got to change state law. We do need to do that, and that work needs to take place, but that is a long road. And in the meantime, we have many, many days ahead of us and many, many actions that are taking place, and many instances in which our police officers are going to be placed at risk and our residents are in grave danger every day. So I just want to remind us all that we do have to take action. Our city has to take action, and we really do need to make sure that we are taking a look comprehensively at every single policy and procedure that we can put in place to guide our employees to do the best we can under these awful, awful circumstances in which we find ourselves.
Thank you. And I agree. And that's the purpose of this, not to challenge federal or state laws. It's to say we're going to support our officers in these cases. And there needs to be some sort of written like you said, a policy of how we go about that. And someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think next week's meeting, we'll see if we can get the police chief, we can see if we can get in some people from the leadership and the association to come in and give their views on what they feel would be helpful to them so that they're protected. Not asking them to go out and pick up everybody's gun they see, but if in the case that someone goes to them and says, you know, my cousin's talking about going out and shooting some people tonight because he's mad because they did something to somebody else. And if the police go and they pull that gun from that person, I think that's reasonable to say, okay, well, my understanding, you know, these are my feelings. I think next week we'll pursue this a little bit further. So, Madam Clerk, if you could, or if the clerk is here, Terry, if you're here, I'd like to, and if someone else has other thoughts on who we need to bring in, I'd like to get the chief of police, the public safety director. I would like to, again, send something to the Officers Association as well as the leadership and the Ethical Society that they could weigh in on how they would best feel comfortable in a situation like this. We're not going to ask them to go against state law. We're not going to try to create laws. We want them to feel comfortable in doing their job. If they feel, this is my opinion, not necessarily the opinion of everybody here, but if they take a gun, I want them to feel comfortable in doing that, especially like a lot of times, maybe a homicide officer, as he's interviewing people, may go to somebody and say, yeah, in fact, I know that so-and-so is going to go out and kill somebody because they feel they killed somebody they knew, and if the police officer is being told something like that, I think they should feel comfortable if we take somebody's guns away. I mean, in that case, I'm a lawful gun owner. I don't think that the police are going to come take my guns away. But I do think if my family thought that I've lost my mind and I'm mad at somebody and I'm going out with my guns, I would hope the police come and take my guns away. So anyway, it's my thoughts. We're gonna try and get them all in next week. If anybody has a closing comment on this subject, just raise your hand or jump in. If not, we're gonna move on. I see none, so we are gonna move on. So, Mr. Pinkney, given the fact that we've had 185, 190 murders, I'm not even talking about gun violence. I'm talking about these are actual people that are dead. Is Cure Violence working? And can you give us an update on Cure Violence? And I know that you have to come in and report to us at least once a year, because whether or not we keep funding Cure Violence, it was never guaranteed that it was going to be endlessly funded. Each year it comes up, and each year it's whether or not to continue to fund it. So the question I think I get asked is Cure Violence working? Why do you think it's working? If it is, or do you think it should be scrapped for a whole new idea? I'm going to let you kind of give us an update and your thoughts on all that. And then we're going to go straight down the list, starting with the vice chairwoman, and we're going to go down from there.
Sure, thank you. Good afternoon. So I did share a document with the clerk, who I believe he shared with everyone on the committee. So I'll touch on that document really briefly. I won't read it, but I'll just touch on what was contained in it. And then I'll talk about the evaluation that is currently underway of Cure Violence, which can get to the question of whether it's working or not, or what the impact of it, and obviously then take any questions. So I took over the sort of oversight of Cure Violence probably in the summertime. And one of the things was many people asked a lot of questions about Cure Violence, what was going on. So one of the first steps is really to engage Cure Violence Global, who is the contracted technical assistance partner for Cure Violence. And one of the things that Cure Violence Global does is collect all the data from all of the sites. So we wanted to get a handle on what data was being collected and put together information that we could start to put out publicly so that everyone could see what is happening, or at least what's being reported, what's happening with Cure Violence. And that information is being posted on the Office of Violence Prevention website now, and it will be continue to be posted monthly. So the document and the presentation that was shared really goes into helping people to understand what Cure Violence is, the work that it does in terms of intervening in violence, doing de-escalation, basically trying to interrupt violence and any retaliation of that violence. The document gives a snapshot of the 3 different catchment areas that we currently have within the city of St. Louis. And it talks about when those various catchment areas were actually launched, because all 3 weren't launched at the same time, as I'm sure everyone on the call knows. So we have Wells, Goodfellow, Hamilton Heights area, we have the Walnut Park area, and we have the Dutchtown area. It talks about participants and non-participants. So Cure Violence, the people that work in there, the interrupters and the case managers and the supervisors, all engage people every day. There are people who are participants, who are the high-risk individuals who they seek to de-escalate violence and prevent retaliations for, who they tend to sign up on their caseloads to work with over a period of time. And then you have people who aren't participants, who are enrolled in the program, but who are engaged by the staff. The presentation also talks about the different resources that are provided in it, aside from any interruptions of conflicts that take place for the participants. It does give some numbers for the month of September in terms of the people who were engaged and who are currently under case management. There were 108 people engaged across the 3 sites, and there were 177 children included in there. Obviously, I believe we've had over 100 young people under the age of 18 shot this year, and that's way too many. So the fact that they're engaging young people is important. It goes on to talk about, and I wanted to make sure I provided to this group, numbers from the program's inception and year-to-date numbers in terms of people engaged. So since the beginning of the program, across the 3 sites, 124 high-risk individuals have been engaged and signed up on the caseloads, and about 31,000 non-participants, including 3,000 children. This month, year-to-date, about 57 participants have been engaged, and about 8,400 non-participants and 1,100 children. The document also goes into conflicts and what that means in terms of, we always talk about Cure Violence trying to de-escalate and prevent conflicts and violence related to conflicts. So for the month of September, there's been 43 conflicts interrupted throughout the 3 zones, and about 209 individuals were included in those 43. And then once again, I wanted to make sure this group had numbers on what has happened since the beginning of the program and for year to date. So since the beginning of the program, there's been 341 interruptions and about 149 what are called follow-up interruptions. And those follow-ups occur when there's additional work that needs to be done to resolve a conflict. Those interruptions have included about 1,900 individuals since the beginning of the program. Year to date, there have been 172 interruptions with 99 follow-ups, which included about 1,000 individuals. The document also talks about the different types of interruptions and the types of conflicts. The majority of them are involving individuals. 47% are conflicts between individuals. There's some group conflicts, about 23%. And there were 14% were related to some type of retaliation. The outcomes of those, there's different ways that conflicts can be resolved, or have the different outcomes, excuse me. The overwhelming majority, 63%, were resolved at the time of the initial interaction of those 43 conflicts. There were some conditional resolutions, which basically occur when there's some agreements that are established between the groups or individuals, so that there's no further violence. And only 7% were unresolved. We also provided information about year-to-date and program-to-date in terms of conflict outcomes for each of the sites. And then we also provided some general police data and violence data, cure violence. The health department and epidemiologists there collect information from the police department and around violence in the areas, the cure violence catchment areas. So we provided data on each site and collectively across the 3 sites, comparing last year to this year. And you can see that, there's a big spike. There was a spike in violence in the city in August generally. So you can see there are times throughout the year when the action in the catchment areas is below what was last year. In the summertime, when we had a spike in violence in the city, there was more violence in the catchment areas as opposed to last year. But right now, in the most recent months, they're below the activity of last year. So we have a slide that talks about all 3 sites together, and then there's a slide for each site individually so that you can see what's happening in each catchment area as opposed year to date from January to September versus January to September last year. And so that's the main information around what is currently happening. There is, and we've contracted with Washington University to conduct an evaluation of cure violence. That is a 3-year contract that runs from 2021 to 2024. The work that is done based on that evaluation is they track the implementation. They conduct surveys. Those surveys is 3 waves of surveys, so 1 each year. They're currently engaged in the 2nd wave. They also conduct surveys with the participants. The result of the evaluation is due in August of 2024. Currently, they're planning focus groups with community members and interviews with staff in the catchment areas. The community members that they will engage in the focus groups are, local businesses, residents, and clergy. And they talk to workers around identifying potential people for those groups, and they also hang flyers in the community. Most of the work to date has really involved creating and fielding a large-scale survey of residents to get a feel from the residents of what they feel about what's going on. They're currently receiving responses from the 2nd iteration of that survey. They identify people for those surveys by randomly selecting households from lists based on DMV records and voter registration records. Those households have to be listed as occupied in those records. And they're analyzing police data from 3 years before the start of cure violence and 3 years after to see what impacts there were. So in terms of whether it's working or not, I think that's where the evaluation is going to help us do that. And it's important that community members and participants are part of that so we can get a feel from them as well. I will say that cure violence is a piece of violence reduction efforts. So it is not something that we should be looking at as that it's going to solve all violence in the city of St. Louis or any city. So you do have to employ or deploy other strategies as well in addition to cure violence. So I think, seeing the results of the evaluation, seeing what community members are sharing about what they think about crime and what their feelings about the program, and continually monitoring and I have monthly or bi-weekly conversations with the heads of the sites. So continually talking to them about what is going on and evaluating their work from a compliance standpoint is what's important, and sort of answering that question about whether it's working or not. So I'll stop there and open it up to questions.
Vice Chairwoman Tyus, you're going to kick us off and then we'll go down the list.
The older woman's muted if she's talking.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Mr. Pinkney, thank you for appearing before this committee. I read the things that you passed out to us. Maybe I missed it. Is there something in your report about how much we've spent on this program since we started it?
No, but I can tell you what the current contract numbers are for it. I know initially $7 million was allocated, and I believe all those funds by the end of this fiscal year will be expended.
So you talk about when 7 million was allocated in 2021, maybe, or 20, something like that.
Yes, I believe all of them, yes.
Because I was the last person to come on board because I am not a fan. I wasn't a fan. And so 7 million was allocated, and from was it 2021 or 2022? Do you know?
So the first site was launched in May of 2020. All of them were launched in May of 2020 at different times. So,
and we've spent the 7 million. How long did it take us to spend the 7 million?
it's been 3 years.
3 years, okay. And now we have a new contract for how much?
No, we don't. This is all part of that original 7 million older woman. So the current contracts are basically the end of that 3-year cycle.
Okay, and when does the current contract end?
At June 30th. Sorry, the end of the
June 30th.
fiscal year, June 30th
Okay.
of 2023.
And so this report is for us to do an analysis of how they're doing.
Well, I'm sharing the information that I have gleaned from what has been happening in terms of activity, yes.
Okay, so this is my own personal experience. I had one of the people from Cure Violence call me and decided he was going to do something in the first ward, which was totally in opposition to what the law says. And he called me and said, well, we're doing it anyway. I said, no, you're not. He basically threatened me, said I didn't know who I was dealing with. And I said, you better Google Sharon Tyus because you don't know who you dealing with, okay? And I called the police chief, and at the time, the director of public safety lived in my ward right down the street. The police chief Hayden came from my ward. I grew up there. And so, but the entitlement that I heard from them was very disheartening. Like, we can do this if we want to. I actually called Sal Martinez, never heard back from him because they were connected with him. And I'm disappointed in the things that I've been hearing. And I most certainly was disappointed that he thought he could call me and threaten me. And he should have looked up how long my memory is when you do things like that. I guess I'm just really waiting to see, because I've spoken to different aldermen whose ward is impacted by Cure Violence. They have the program, and some of them was not that happy with it. And talking to the constituents that I represent, they don't understand how we pay people who already been trouble in the community to then try to stop violence, okay? And there's been some missteps with, we weren't supposed to be allowing the police to know what was going on and those kind of missteps. So I'm just anxious to see what we spent our first $7 million on, because I'm on record saying, I don't want to make the mistake of voting for something without trying it. And 7 million, although is a lot of money, if that's something that can help, I'm for it. But if it's not going to be something that turns out that has really worked, I'm not for continuing to do these programs, because I see all these names that every time we let a contract out, they appear to be on that list of getting some of the funds. So whether it's a good program or not, they become, I call them poverty pimps, okay? And that's what they do. I do, and I don't say it behind their backs. And I will say it right to the directors and the CEOs, some of whom I trained when they were down here. And so I don't want us to continue to do something if it is not working. We have a lot, we do want violence to end. I was a public defender. When I was an attorney with the public defender's office, I've always defended trying to figure out ways to stop violence. But I think we wait until it's already violence. And so the city of St. Louis, we should be doing things like putting skating rinks and movie theaters and giving our kids something to do, which in all the 31 years I've been here, hardly anything that we've done. When Jack Garvey was the 14th Ward Alderman, he put something in the Rams bill that gave us a little money to do some recreation, but we really don't do the things we should do as a city. And I think addressing something after it's a full-blown problem is not the way. So I grew up as the twig is bent, so grows the tree. And so I'm 66 years old and my mother is 87. I'm still scared of her because she established some rules that I still follow to this day. Okay, so I'm just gonna watch what these trends say and see what happens. But I hope we're not just trying to keep something in place because certain people are now, they got their hands on the funds and we're not seeing a actual decrease in crime and helping the neighborhoods. That's just my statement about it. Because I was, again, the very last person that said, well, I'll try it. And Elliot Davis interviewed me and said, well, you said, and I said, yeah, I said $7 million is a lot, but I'm willing to give it the first try to see if it is something that will work. But I'm not willing to give it the second, the third, and the fifth, because that's what we do too much. We end up holding on to things that don't work. So I hope we get a proper evaluation.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I agree. That's why I want to make sure you and all the other members of the Board of Aldermen are provided data as work is going on, not in a one point in time. So we will be posting it monthly. I will say it is important. I can understand your thinking, but it is important in this work to have people who are titled as credible messengers who have been involved to be out there and engaging others who have the likelihood of engaging in violence. So, that it is a challenge in that workforce, but we have to deal with those challenges. And I agree with you. We want to make sure it's effective though, just because
Right, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You need to be effective. I'm sorry.
No, you were speaking, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to say, it's not just about be a credible messenger, having that pass. It's about you having turned that corner and being out there and really engaging the people who we need engaged to help decrease violence. So you're right.
And I agree with that. And every day to this day, I still run into people who I was their public defender. And I used to be a juvenile. And when I went there with David Stokely, they had 2 public defenders. When we left, we had 5 because we raised hell and we defended their rights and made sure they did due process. And so I see people sometimes and they'll grab me. I was at Target and they said, you don't remember you were my public defender? I was never got any trouble. I'm proud. Those are my children and I'm proud. But I also hear from my seniors and people who need help, and they're like the people who don't get in trouble. And so sometimes we focus so much attention on the people who are in trouble. We don't want to focus attention on the people who pay their taxes, do what they're supposed to do. And that makes me very, very sad, okay? And that happens in schools. The kids that get in trouble gets all the teachers' attention. And the kids who do what they are not, they're supposed to, they kind of just get pushed to the back or sent to the library to study on your own. And I just want it to be a balanced commitment to not only those, and I agree with you, you have to have some street cred. You can't go talk to people about the streets if you don't have that credibility. So I do know that, but I would love to have us have $7 million also committed to all these seniors in North and South St. Louis, especially who paid their taxes, their own limited incomes. And I want them to have that same $7 million commitment. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you. Okay, we're going on the list. So it would be Alderwoman Davis, you're next, and then Alderwoman Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm really not going to comment on cure violence. It's still too soon to know whether or not it's been effective. But we do need probably 99 other initiatives that are operating all at the same time. And they need to operate at all levels, as the Alderwoman from the First Ward said. Because even engaging senior citizens in today's world, we also have to engage them because they're also getting involved with taking drugs at ages that I didn't realize seniors normally do. So there's a lot that we should be doing. And I'm going to give you all a very good example. I've been begging for, I know, 5 years. I went ahead and did one independently here for Jeff Vanderloo. an information guide, but something even smaller than that, that should be everywhere, on every counter, anywhere anybody might be, is a nice business card size that gives the simple information of where you can get help or where you can find what you need. And we still haven't done it. People can't help themselves if they don't know where to get the help. The young man that committed this atrocity this past week, he was a gamer. He loved to play the games. He was interested in creating games and all of that. And we have at least 5 places that I know of that he could have been engaged in, and they were free of charge, and could even get to the point where he could become, and they say he was good, that he could have become a national and international gamer. But we don't have that information out here. It's just not out here. And we need to do better. So I'm hoping we can spend more funds on providing information to people because it's so needed. And I'm just going to wait and see what the outcomes are with the final data on cure violence. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Howard.
I guess I am looking at some of the data, and it I don't know, maybe I'm looking at it wrong, but it doesn't look as though it's been a huge success. But I would, as the 2 alderwomen before me stated, maybe we need to broaden our net. One of the things that I see is that children are getting involved very early in crime and getting into stealing cars. Some of them can't hardly even reach the pedals. And I would say that, when we're talking about early intervention, maybe we need to have some parental intervention and some parental education on how you need to supervise your children and bring them along and, nurture them and love them and make sure that they're on track. Now, I'm not saying everybody's a bad parent, but a lot of these problems start because there's no boundaries ever set for some of these children. And I don't know, I know you've engaged some children, but it starts in the cradle. It doesn't start when they're 16. It doesn't start when they're 12. It doesn't start when they're 10. It starts in the cradle. If you can't catch them between the ages of 1 and 5, pretty much, and my belief is the die is cast. You can retrieve them, but I think that early intervention would save our society a whole lot of grief and sorrow on the part of our society and the parents and the families involved. And I mean, this is doing something, but I really, when I look at what is going on societally and in our city about how children are kind of left to their own devices, we need to invest in our youth. And that starts with some partnerships with the schools, having some intervention, some education, some way where parents can get some help. It starts over at the juvenile detention. The kids aren't coming to school. Are parents held accountable? As far as I know, I don't think so. I don't even know, are there any truant officers anymore? Because this is when it starts. That's when it starts. And I know sometimes that's the long road. You're not going to see any reduction in crime for, 10 years. You're working with younger children, excuse me. But I think we need to maybe look at those types of things. And Mr. Pinkney, since you're with the Office of Children and Youth, I think this may be in your ballpark, so to speak, that maybe we need to partner with the schools and offer some services for those children that are having difficulty in some communication. As a former educator, I never found that, where there was a lot of interaction to work together. So, and it's all schools, not just the public schools. Every one of them needs help, and parents need help because many of them are, working. 2 parents are working or they're single parents. And it's a big job these days to keep tabs on your kids. It's not like back in the old days where you said be home before the streetlights come on, because they don't come home when streetlights come on anymore. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Alderwoman. I just wanted to just raise up for yourself and Alderwoman Davis as well. You know, the Office of Violence Prevention, the work we're doing with community violence intervention is about filling in some of those gaps that you both raised, rightfully so. So this isn't just about cure violence. As I said, cure violence is a small piece of this. I meet with school leaders on a weekly basis from all the school systems, not just SLPS. And so we are looking at work in the juvenile arena. We're looking at youth diversion work. We're looking at reentry work. We are looking at tackling this with community partners from all angles. And so we are currently contracting with 8 organizations through community violence intervention work. And we are looking at 10 neighborhoods that have higher rates of violence. And those organizations are working in those communities collaboratively to address employment issues, substance use issues, trauma issues related to gun violence, domestic violence. Like you all said, is so many issues that are related. On the school side, we've been partnering with all the school systems around looking at out of school time programming, and we continue to do that. The bill that created the Office of Violence Prevention allocated an additional $3.6 million in ARPA funds for out of school time programming to make sure that we can continue summer programming and during school programming after school to create safe spaces. So we are working in all those places. And, you know, as you have ideas or needs, feel free to send them along and we can make sure we're addressing the needs. But we are communicating with families in community, young people, to also hear from them what they need.
Thank you.
Okay, Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Spencer, are you still with us? Looking to make sure. Okay, Alderwoman Pam Boyd. Alderwoman Boyd, are you still with us? Some of the people had other meetings, so I know we lost a few. Alderman Brandon Bosley. Okay, I don't see him there, and Oldenburg's not there. Alderman Brett Narayan.
Thank you, Chairman Vaccaro. Just, I guess, one quick question on this for Mr. Pinkney. So I was going through the material sent out today and just did some kind of back of the napkin math, and it's looking like we're spending just north of $20,000 per intervention at this point. I know we're early still, and so I don't want to like say, oh, that number is, you know, great or outrageous or, you know, anything like that. In other places where this has been implemented, are the costs, I guess for lack of better words, front loaded in a way where we see the community realize that this is a resource out there and then the cost per intervention start to come down? Or is this kind of the cost that we should be thinking about to have people get out into the street and disrupt these issues costs about $20,000 an incident?
Yeah, I don't know if people have broken it down like that. Traditionally, I would have to just go back and look. I don't want to answer that question without really having looked at it. I do know it's a challenge, right? Because you can't prove counterfactual, right? You can't show what you did, what you prevented, right? So you see all those interruptions. How many other things could have happened if those interruptions didn't happen? Is a thing that you had to add into that cost, right? If it was going to be 10 other incidents, you know, obviously no one can put a price on a life, right? But it's one of those things that is really a challenge in that we see those interventions, but what did we really know about what else would have happened in the result of that? And so I think even the working question, obviously everything is about value. I'm not going to sit here and say it isn't, but I would think the people who were involved in those interventions and the people whose lives may have been spared from not maybe being killed, but gun violence in their community, it worked for them in that moment, in that specific intervention, right? And I don't know. I mean, this is where hearing from the community, a couple of older people raised a valid point about, like, we need to know what people are hearing, of real understanding or knowing or feeling in these communities where it's happening. But I think just to generally answer your question, I do think it's probably a higher value on this, but if you look at it in short term, it's a higher value, but what about the long term, right? If we can get violence down in our communities, if we can increase economic activity, so those communities are becoming more vibrant, and people are opening business there, and people have, we get rid of these food deserts, and we have supermarkets and all that, then the $20,000 is worth it, right? But otherwise it's not. So that's where we have to make sure that we are all working together and, holding people to account and saying, hey, we want to make sure our communities are getting this, if this is what we're paying for.
Thank you for that. And I certainly appreciate the context of kind of the cycle of violence that frequently one violent crime leads to another. And it's hard to pinpoint where that would stop if it were just to continue to spiral there. I would be curious, and I hope that in your annual report that you could include, maybe from some other jurisdictions where this has been implemented, if the cost per intervention in the second year, third year, so on and so forth came down, because I could see that being the case, where more and more people start to understand this resource is there. Maybe you don't have to advertise it as much. Maybe people come to you easier because they know that you're there, or just the community as a whole starts to accept this as a resource, and you don't have to kind of push as hard. But I would definitely be curious to see that, not because I think that $20,000 is too much to spend to protect a life by any means, but I think that we do have a responsibility of stewardship of the city's funds, and to take a look at whether this is the best use of those resources to prevent exactly these kind of acts. And I appreciate you coming today and answering the questions, and your frankness with me on that. I know it's a difficult question to answer, so I appreciate you, and thank you very much. With that, I'll yield.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Shameen Clark Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Mr. Pinkney, for the way you not just showed up here today, but you always show up in the community. We always run into each other with this information and these resources, and I will wait. I don't have any more specific questions that haven't been asked. I'll just wait for the evolving data to see hopefully how we continue the work of cure violence.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Page.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Mr. Pinkney, first and foremost, thanks so much for appearing before us. And I've been combing through the report fairly carefully, and there are a couple of things that just jumped off the page at me, if you will. I noticed that in the 3 neighborhood zones that are focused on in the report, each one had major spikes of assault category crimes in 2022. In the period from, I'd say, May through August, with peaks in June and July. And it doesn't appear that the program, which is not the only resource, Cure Violence, or anything else mitigated those spikes. Can you address those spikes, what they're made of, why they occurred, why those spikes were not mitigated?
Sure. So one thing I'll make sure I point out is that you're seeing data in those neighborhoods, in those catchment areas, which are small, but it sort of leaves out what was happening in the city and even around those areas at large. So those spikes were spikes that happened in the city. And the question would be whether those spikes were lesser or more than what else happened in other parts of the city. But I will tell you, looking back in July and August, especially, what we started to see was a lot of violence related to interpersonal beat, like just regular people hanging out, maybe hanging out at a bar or hanging out at a restaurant and engaging in beefs. If you look at what Cure Violence is focused on, it's focused more on people who are consistently engaging in violence, people who may be in quote unquote gangs or groups that are focusing on violence and trying to interrupt those. And based on the numbers of those interactions that happen, you could argue that they did their job in those areas. It's tough to stop somebody from showing up at a gas station to get gas, and then somebody else shows up and you get in an argument and the shooting happens, right? It's tough with a mother and father, sister and brother family that is traumatized from all the things they're involved in. They get in an argument and shoot each other. It's hard for Cure Violence to prevent those things because that's not what it's focused on, and they're not out in people's houses, right? Cure Violence isn't focused on stopping drug dealing, right? And so people who may go meet somewhere to exchange drugs and somebody decides to rob them. So we had a lot of those types of incidents. I'm not going to tell you exact numbers because I don't have it in front of me, but that's why you wouldn't see mitigation of some of those types of spikes that may happen. And a lot of that was sort of what was happening throughout the summer. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that would be my response based on what I know.
Well, thank you so much. And I understand your response, but I'm sure you can also understand why those spikes were very concerning as I reviewed the report.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Definitely. The one thing I can say is, thank goodness, in most cases, looked as if those things have come down and we're below those levels of violence from what we saw in August. And I think that's a testament, not just to Cure Violence, as I'll keep saying. Cure Violence is just a piece of our violence prevention efforts and violence reduction efforts. So I think it's a testament to not only Cure Violence, but to the other work that has been going on in those communities.
Thank you. With that one question, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank
Okay. Anyone, alderperson off the committee? If you have a question, would you like to pop on and jump in? I don't see any, and if no one else has a follow-up from Mr. Pinkney, I certainly thank you so much for coming in today and talking to us. We may have you back again shortly, you just never know. Hopefully you can get some of the answers to the questions.
And anyone can obviously reach out to me, even if I'm not here, right? So please, if you have questions, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, God bless, thank you.
Bless, thank you.
Seeing no other business, and we will excuse Tom Oldenburg for necessary absence. Unless anyone has anything for the good of the group, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
we are adjourned.